Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? Welcome to the State of Craft episode 21. I'll be introducing our lovely guest today, Shannon, in a bit here. I have a few things I want to chat about first before we do that. Um, First off, I want to acknowledge this land that I'm on here. I live in Nelson, BC, and it's the traditional ancestral territory of the Sinaiaks people, some intermarriage as well with the Tanaha that made it ancestral home for them too. And there used to be thousands of Sinaiaks people here in the Nelson area, and now there's like less than 10, I believe, or so it's a really small handful. And all of those people were killed off by settlers here through really disgusting scalping programs and other things of that nature. And I think it's important to kind of recognize and think back on, just the history the white settlement has done here in this area. And I encourage all of you to think about, the regions you're in, what the indigenous history is there, and what kind of differences and livelihoods might have existed that have really allowed people like us here get to gather today on a virtual platform to, have a relatively blissful life, and while others are maybe suffering with a lot of death of entire cultures and loved ones. I think it's important to do that. So yeah, I encourage you all to kind of think about that. With that little bit of sadness out of the way, I'll talk a little bit about CertiCraft and the State of Craft, and then I'll introduce Shannon here. So the State of Craft is a podcast series where we discuss the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. As I'm sure all of you here are aware, there's a lot of issues in how the various policies, both federally and provincially, have been rolled out. And the goal of this podcast is to allow for open discussions, to talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and to really kind of ideate on what we can do differently to allow for that to improve, so that us small businesses who really are the majority of stakeholders in this space can actually thrive and succeed instead of being pushed down like it seems to be the case right now. CertiCraft, I'm the CEO of that company. We are on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market. Our flagship product is also called CertiCraft, and it is a compliance platform that makes the regulatory requirements here in Canada really, really straightforward for license holders. We generate all the reports and records that you need for you and guide you through tracking everything that you need. All right, one last housekeeping thing before I introduce Shannon. We have a chat there. Some of you guys are already saying things there, which is great. Please do say hi and interact there if you have anything you want to say. We have a separate dedicated questions tab. If you have questions for Shannon, ask them there. You can upvote other questions that you like, and at the end, I'll order everything by upvote, and we'll go through that in order. All right, I've said enough housekeeping things. I see we've went from 14 when we started to 21 people now, so I'm gonna bring Shannon onto the stage here and say hi. Hi, Shannon.
Hey, Sami.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe talk a bit about your history and what brought you to the position you're in today as the CEO of Antidote.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me, and it's nice to see your smiling face. And welcome, everybody. Good question. How did I get here? I think I am a lover of the cannabis plant, and I honor it as like sacred medicine, and like I honor a lot of plant medicine. And that goes back to a long history of being a child that grew up in nature, and mainly on Vancouver Island, the Lower Mainland, and the Kootenays. And I actually studied herbology and natural health food and counseling at Douglas College back in about 1998. And at that time, that's where I kind of opened up to studying medicine and doing a lot of wild crafting and working with plants. I also at that time got really into counseling, and then I was a street youth worker for Dusk to Dawn in the downtown east side, and kind of was really involved in working with street youth and being really trying to help people through drug addictions and providing a lot of support and resources. And that was like around the same time the Compassion Club started on Commercial Drive. And the Compassion Club really inspired me. And I saw a lot of compassion for people and providing medicine. And the people and the staff are just really beautiful humans. And that kind of got me onto the path of really getting into understanding cannabis as a medicine and how it affects people and how it can also support people through drug addiction and lots of different things. So that's kind of where it all started. And then I have been really involved in agriculture for over 20 years, specifically around food production and specifically around localized food systems and organic farming. And I worked for a nonprofit organization and studied organic agriculture and did a bunch of apprenticeships with some really successful local farms in the Fraser Valley that at that time started the whole kind of organic food movement. And then from there, I got shot off into a small village in the Kootenay region where I wanted to study biodynamic farming and sustainable agriculture. And biodynamic farming is really a lot about no off-farm inputs and using all the plant medicine and a mix of animal husbandry with herbology and food. And I helped run a community-supported agriculture program. And ever since then, I've been working in agriculture. So that's how that all started. And that kind of, you put two and two together, a love for farming and a love for the cannabis plant. So that's kind of how I got here. And yeah.
And then you were involved with the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative that Community Futures did, weren't you?
Yeah, so legalization was an interesting thing for me. I kind of went through an existential crisis when I heard about legalization. There were some things I found really challenging with it, and I had to really sit with it for a really long time and consider all the thoughts and feelings that I was going through. Eventually, and we can get into that of what's working and what's not working, but eventually I made the jump into getting into the legal cannabis world, and I wanted to become a consultant and trying to help people transition from synthetic-based growing into organic-based growing, and went to Community Futures. I think I was the first cannabis person there, and wanted to start my own business. And then they kind of swiped me up and also swiped Stacy up and saw that we were a really good match. And then that program started. And so Stacy and I got really involved in helping people transition into the legal market. And we helped them with their business planning and licensing and into production and audit help and all kinds of things. And that just kind of
just to interrupt for a moment. For anybody watching who is unfamiliar with the CBTI program, essentially over the course of 2 years, Shannon and Stacy helped, I think, about 55 or so different farmers in the Kootenay area prepare and apply for Health Canada cannabis licenses. And this is all completely free to the actual cultivators, at odds with the many consultants around who are charging easily $30,000, $50,000, over $100,000 sometimes. It was a much needed service and made a big difference in many of those facilities who likely would not have gone through that process otherwise without the service being available. So I think a third of the licenses in BC, the micro licenses in BC, are all centered around this region, even though there's a much greater number of percentage of people who applied here relative to other cannabis growing regions in BC entirely as a result of this program. So now you know what Shannon was up to for a couple years there.
Yeah, and I think there with that came after that ended, because the funding it didn't go any further, which was really unfortunate. After that ended, there was all of these people that we had helped licensed, and I could just see them continually struggle in trying to get to market. And there's a, like, I take a lot of, you know, for me, I guess there's a weight of responsibility, even though it's not my responsibility completely. But there's still, I care so much about all the clients and all the people that I worked with. And caring is just my nature. And so it kind of like, I was like, okay, this isn't working still. We've like helped these people, you know, go into this industry, and more help is needed. So that's kind of how Antidote came about with, and it was a collaborative effort with a bunch of growers. And now we're moving into trying to solve a really big problem, which is how do we provide a pathway for small to medium-sized businesses to be successful and thrive in this market.
So what is Antidote in 2 sentences?
Well, in 2 sentences.
You gotta have an elevator pitch, Shannon, if you're gonna be the CEO of a company.
Well, Antidote is, I see it us as a hub for our region, to help people from getting licensed to getting them to market, and providing people with a simple, easy way to get to market while promoting the farmers, you know, promoting them, and promoting also promoting regenerative agriculture. We're not just solely regenerative agriculture, but we that's a huge foundation, and just a community hub for the Kootenays.
And to bring it to like Cannabis Act, cannabis regulation terms, I would say a big component of that, a technical component of that, is that you guys are going for a standard processing license, and that you will act as a processor to allow to kind of serve that bottleneck and be a processor that actually understands the needs of farmers, a processor that's owned by licensed farmers in the Kootenay region, and therefore, you know, you're trying to just support yourselves and others in a similar position, as opposed to, you know, not really caring about the reality of farmers here.
Yeah, and we're also do a lot of, our focus is also really on extraction and creating value-added products. Awesome. Hopefully the micro-processing licenses become easier and the regulations change. So I think that focus on extraction and value-added products is really important.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's a nice, thorough introduction into who you are, your history, and how you got to where you are today. Like, I mean, I've for everybody in the audience here, I've known Shannon for a few years. She's actually the person who convinced me to move to Nelson. I came and taught a workshop on compliance at Nelson back in 2019, and her and Paul Kelly from Community Futures took me out to dinner and just like bullied me. They were like, "You got to move to Nelson. We need you here. We need CertiCraft here." But anyway, that's a whole other story. But I've known Shannon quite closely since then, and I can attest to the fact that at every step of the journey, she's always been looking at what are people struggling with, what can we do to address those issues, because this is bullshit that people can't actually be viable in this market. Like, people have put so much time and effort and money into transitioning, and what they can't just like be worry free, like that's not okay. And so that's kind of been her mission that I've seen, just at every step of the way. What can we do to, like, she started like the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council, which is a 20-ish person council of producers, licensed producers, government officials, service providers, who are just doing, we're all doing a lot of advocacy work to try to make changes, both on provincial and federal and local levels. And there's a lot of little things like that Shannon's done. So can't give enough props to you and what you do, Shannon. You're a lovely human being who's making a real difference in this region here and at large, because the changes that we introduce to bigger levels affect everybody, not just here locally. Okay, so with you're welcome. With that being said, let's shift into the more discussion part of this conversation here. Let's start with what's going well. What do you think is going well with legalization, specifically in the craft cannabis world?
Well, I don't have a lot to say of what's going well in the craft cannabis world. I think what I'll focus on is what's a good part of legalization of cannabis, and that goes into my existential crisis, and that again, the Cannabis Economic Development Council is a solution to part of the negative aspects. But what's a good thing about legalization? I think that's an important thing to touch upon. And what I like about it and what's going well is the good production practices. I'm actually a fan of the good production practices. I'm a fan of standard operating procedures. And that has a lot to do with creating a really good product for the end consumer. And it's important to have a certain amount of regulations in an industry. Like if you want to go to a restaurant, you want that restaurant to be following health measures, so you're feeling confident that you're not going to get food poisoned. If you want to hop on a plane, you want to make sure that airplane is, a safe.
Yeah, the engine's not going to fail halfway through.
So regulations are an important part of working in a system with with lots of people, and that is the government's job, is to make safe and healthy products for consumers, to protect the safety and health of all Canadians. So there are some really good things about it. And that being said, it's very overly regulated, and I can go into what's not going well, but I'm just going to focus on the good things for a sec here. Standard operating procedures are also really good. Understanding the kind of traditional way that operators have, I think that it kind of makes people up their game as growers, and to create procedures that all staff and all people can follow. So there's accountability all along the way. I think those things are good. It actually can negate some really challenging things that can happen inside a facility between staff and people, and who's responsible for what, and how do you go about doing this, and making sure that you have a really good product. So that is a really good thing, and that is what's going well in this industry. And the other thing that's going well is creating safe work environments for people. Part of why I was really pro legalization really has a lot to do with pesticides and how to control pests and disease in a cannabis facility. And I think that that's a really good thing, is the analytical testing and making people accountable for what kind of pesticides they use, and making sure that, people are safe, workers are safe. People that are working in a legalized cannabis facility have to pay attention to workers' safety. You have to provide people with the proper protective gear. You have to provide people need to be educated on how to use pesticides. Best case scenario is people don't use pesticides at all, which is another really kind of thing that's going well, is that if you're a traditional cannabis grower and now you're working in the legal cannabis world, now you really need to learn about protecting yourself and the people around you, because the use of unregulated pesticides can kill people. And lots of people can get cancer, autoimmune diseases. There's a lot of things that and not everybody in the cannabis world, in the traditional cannabis world, uses pesticides. There are some people, I think, that, maybe don't understand the big picture of what a lot of workers are put into positions. So that's what's going well.
And now, like to add to that last piece, if it's a legal business in BC, and I'm sure every other province has some kind of equivalent, but in BC now you can call WorkSafe BC if you're being sexually harassed or if just anything is taking place. It's just like inappropriate, unprofessional, not okay, and legitimately like causing you grievance. You can actually like do something about it. Whereas if you're working in a completely underground, illicit, off the books facility, you're not going to call the government and be like, "Hey, I'm being harassed and my boss is making inappropriate comments to me," or whatever it might be. Like there's no way to protect yourself in that kind of scenario. It's like either you quit or you confront it, which might escalate the situation. Not everybody's comfortable with conflict of that sort, or you just suck it up. Those are kind of your options, and that's not really great when there's that kind of power dynamic of boss with employee.
Yeah, you're spot on there. And the cannabis industry is predominantly women workers, and women really also. What's going well is the legalization of cannabis allows women to get more involved in this industry because a lot of women just didn't have the same appetite for risk. And so there are very, very few women growers out there. And it's not an even playing field, and legalization of cannabis changes that.
Wait, sorry. Could you help me understand that? Because you said at first that the industry is majority women and that there aren't a lot of women growers. Do you mean that like most trimmers are women, but they don't really do the growing part? Is that kind of what you mean by that, or something?
Well, they do a lot of the growing part. They do a lot of the watering, a lot of the pruning, a lot of the trimming, a lot of.
So then, what do you mean when you say that there's not a lot of women growers? Help me understand that statement.
So it means that a lot of women don't take the risk of starting a grow facility. And then also women don't have a lot of the same economic opportunities to do that. Not put in the position to, not put in the position to be able to be a grower in the traditional cannabis world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on as far as what's going well?
Let's see. Well, I think the other thing that's going well from a community perspective is a lot of the growers now getting together and discussing things and talking about things, and legalization really can help people open up and be proud of who they are and what they're doing, and work together. So I like that part of it. It's really important for mental health and well-being.
Yeah. Awesome. What about the not going well? What I know I know there's a lot to say to that, but what are like kind of the most important things that you think we should be talking about here today?
Well, I think what's not going well, I'm going to start with there's absolutely hardly any funding for any small to medium-sized business to get started. Their charter banks don't even want to open up an account for legal cannabis businesses. And there's the capital requirements to start these businesses are quite huge, and there's no support for that. And it's really disheartening to see. So that's something that's not going well at all.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Well, I think that and almost every other part of what's not going well is because it should be decriminalized. The amount of stigma that is associated with being a legacy cannabis grower or wanting to transition into the legal world is just everywhere you turn. It's stigma. The amount of audits, like I have some small outdoor farmers with one crop, and I think one of them had 6 audits in 1 year and being audited multiply by the CRA and Health Canada at the same time. And this is just like a one-person operation.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't like, I just don't think a lot of that's fair. And then what else isn't going right is that there isn't really a good pathway to get to market for a lot of these small producers. And so what's not going well is you can barely get money to start the business. You start the business, you're being constantly stigmatized by your banking institutions, your government, and then you're going through multiple audits and doing insane record keeping, and you're still being portrayed like you're a bad person and that you need to be watched and monitored and record every little thing, like destroying your fan leaves, like that isn't going well. And I think that, I guess, what would change all that is the decriminalization of cannabis.
So can you help me understand that? Because if cannabis has been legalized, does that not intrinsically mean that it's been decriminalized?
Well, not that I see, because I think a lot of the issues and complications around the charter banks is that it's associated with the Federal Reserve, which is in the United States, which isn't federally illegal. So that adds to all of those complications. The security clearance under the Health Canada licensing, to me, shows that it's kind of a tricky thing, because when I talked to Health Canada about it, they said, well, if you have pot charges, it doesn't mean you're not going to get security cleared. And, it's really whether you have, and records around weapons or violence and those things. But there's no real clarity around that. And so that part, I think, that's really tricky. I think it's tricky for people who have been stigmatized for so long to then be like, okay, now this is legal. And now that it's legal,
we're going to treat you like a criminal. Yeah.
And here is this plant, like, it should have never have been illegal in the first place. And actually, I don't think drugs should be illegal, is my honest opinion. I think all drugs should be regulated, and that we should have a safe supply of all drugs, because you can't stop people from consuming. And so what we need to do is focus on creating safe and healthy places. And then
education.
Focus on education.
Yeah.
And and so the Cannabis Act is all about, getting rid of illicit crime. And there's no real easy, clear pathway to allow people who are working in the illicit industry to transition into the legal. So the government of Canada is not meeting their own act right now.
Yeah. And to your point of decriminalization and the lack of that, I remember one of our earlier podcasts was with lawyers John Conroy and Jack Lloyd, and they spent probably a good 20 to 30 minutes educating us on the system of law in which the Cannabis Act and its regulations were created, which is the criminal law. So it's all within the I forget at this point, it's been a year since that episode, but it's like there's a legal structure for all things related to crime. Nick just put the link there in the chat for those of you watching right now. And it was really eye-opening to learn that it's one of the very few, probably the only real industry out there that's that creates a consumable product that's uses criminal law to mandate and regulate it, whereas everything else is, I forget what it's, I think it might be business law or industry law, I forget what it is, but there's a whole different set of laws when you're focusing on creating actual industry. So to your point, Shannon, that's in some ways it has, even though it's legalized, it hasn't been decriminalized on a legal level because it's all done within a criminal act instead of within a business focused act. But I might be completely butchering the the legal reality here. So go watch episode 4 of the State of Craft to get a sense of of what I'm really trying to say here. But yeah, no, I totally concur with you. It's like, you know, we part of our deal at CertiCraft is that we really support our customers, and that means, you know, if they're having an inspection with the CRA or with Health Canada and they're feeling a bit nervous, like we'll jump on a call with them, with their inspectors. And, you know, some inspectors like this, I'll talk about the CRA mostly because they do way more inspections than Health Canada. Their goal is to do 8 a year, which I think is ridiculous, especially when we're talking about, like you said, like a single person outdoor farmer, 1 crop a year, not even working for like 4 or 5 months of the year because it's winter. And you know, some of those inspectors have been really great. They've been like really easy to work with, really understanding. You know, oh, you're going through your harvest, okay, don't worry about it, just we'll give you a 3-week extension to just have time to deal with your shit and then get back to us. But then there's others that are just like, they know with certainty that this person's a criminal and they're going to get them, and that's their attitude. And it's just like, why is this what you're bringing to the table? Why is this how you're trying to relate with like somebody who has jumped through so many hoops to be legal, to do this thing that they love and care about and think is important for the world, and to do it in a way that just checks off all the boxes. There's all this extra burden that they're doing just to be completely above board. And here you are coming in and like insinuating in very obvious terms that they're a criminal. Like what's that gonna do? And that's just like, you know, a handful of inspectors that we've seen. We've probably seen something like that like 4 or 5 different times over the past year or two. But that kind of attitude permeates a lot of different places. Like I look at like, I don't know, like I feel like the BCLDB kind of has that kind of attitude on some level when they talk about distribution and how they like to approach it. Like there's a lot of different institutions at local, provincial, and federal levels where the underlying vibe that you get is that you guys are trying to divert. We know you. We know you're criminals. We know you're trying to divert. And so we're gonna do all this stuff so that you don't do that. It
I
just
know
doesn't make
that
sense.
it drives me insane because I'm like, do you know how much people have struggled and put their entire lives and homes and everything on the line? You know, like it's not something from my experience that anyone would ever try to do, because what it would do would risk their entire business and everything that they've worked so hard. And that attitude is really because cannabis was illegal for almost 100 years.
Yeah.
However, if you start to look at going back, go back before it became illegal. And we have a plant that has been used in cultures all around the world for thousands of years. So that attitude is just really kind of based on not being educated and not thinking outside of the fact that, oh, you did something that, was wrong because it wasn't legal. And at the same time, there's been this fight for people, that with children with epilepsy, families with cancer who are on major pharmaceutical drugs and they can't eat, and they are vomiting and they need this plant to give them a break so they can let their bodies heal.
Yeah, one of my co-founders, Nick, his wife has an autoimmune disorder, and they went through the medical system. They were on a smorgasbord of all kinds of pharmaceuticals, and they never stopped her seizures. She like had, I don't know, dozens a day or hundreds a month, something pretty ridiculous. And then eventually her mom actually was, you should try cannabis. And hundreds a week is what Nick says. He's added in the chat there. And cannabis just made it all go away. She went down to like 1 seizure, 2 seizures a week or a month, and that was kind of it for them. They're like, okay, cannabis is the way forward. And unlike the pharmaceuticals, it didn't add a whole bunch of extra side effects in addition to not actually helping the seizures in any kind of way. So there's a lot of stories like that out there where it's like it's really not about I want to get high and oh yeah, be bad.
Yeah,
It's like
not at
I
all.
legitimately am struggling, and this is the thing that's helping me.
Well, like, and I think that to me, and like, I'll admit there's I have a little bit of innocence to me, and I have lived a little bit in a bubble coming from, being kind of a BC coastal person, and I just the people. What I'm trying to say is the people that I've worked with to the kind of more legacy growers from the Kootenays, there is nothing criminal about them. The history of cultivation in the Kootenays has a lot to do with draft dodgers, doukhobors, and hippies and Quakers and everybody that wanted to get away from violence and move and go back to the land to grow food and live a natural lifestyle and live in small communities where you need to be accountable to the people around you and to take care of each other and grow food. So like that's the reality of Kootenai people and a lot of where the history of cultivation comes from. And I don't see those people as bad.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, since starting CertiCraft, I've gotten to know quite a few people who are growing cannabis and have grown it historically for decades sometimes, and I've yet to meet a single person who got into it for the money or who got into it for like any reason other than I have a parent with multiple sclerosis. I have a loved one with leukemia. There's always that kind of story attached of I got into this because I wanted to help my community. And then when I started doing it, it turned out that I helped a lot more than just the people immediately around me. There were all these others who then started reaching out, being like, "Oh, can I get some? My mom's got this condition, that condition," and it really was about like supporting communities and their needs using non-pharmaceutical medicine. And somehow this whole broad community of people that are like supporting one another, the government seems to just see solely in this kind of criminal light. And not to say that there isn't a criminal element, like the Hells Angels were very active in growing cannabis and had very shitty practices, and didn't really, they do a lot of other there's many other more organized crime oriented people who grew cannabis who didn't have this kind of attitude. It was a very different relationship, but that's very much the minority of people in the world of cannabis. I think there was a study that came out a few years ago. It showed that there were like only 5% of illicit cannabis producers were involved with organized crime. Everybody else was much more independent, small scale, community oriented. I forget the actual number, so maybe don't quote me on that, but I remember it being like orders of magnitudes different from the vast majority of people who are community oriented.
Well, that's kind of why I bring up there's like this innocence about me, because of where I've come from is around this culture of being kind of back to the landers and people that are so I can understand the need to legalize cannabis and try to get rid of illicit crime, because there's a lot of suffering that happens because of that. And I don't think that we should be in a world where that kind of suffering and and horrible things happen to people because you've made something illegal. That how much percentage of Canadians consume cannabis? Like, I don't even know the actual study, but I think it's quite a bit. So like, we need a really, I don't know, I guess my rant is that there needs to we need to, if the Cannabis Act wants to get rid of illicit production of cannabis and create a safe and healthy supply and workplace for people, and that the government wants to, be responsible and accountable for all Canadians, then they need to make some major change. They need to create a pathway, just like Community Futures was doing, to help people transition. And then again, the Cannabis Act, I have it on my phone here. There's another thing that actually, I have a little Cannabis Act app. There's another thing that there was something that
I feel like there's very few people who can say in a conversation, I have the Cannabis Act on my phone. The Cannabis Act app on my phone, excuse me.
Oh, yeah. The purpose E, reduce the burden on the criminal justice system in relation to cannabis. That's their purpose. So create a way for people.
Yeah.
Don't make it so impossible. Like, that's why Antidote has come about, because people want to be able to package their cannabis and sell, but they can't do that. So now we need to get a standard processing where we need to have, $10 million liability insurance and quality management staff. And we have to have deep pockets so we can pay the excise tax and all of this insane over-regulated stuff. And we have to come together as a community just to get our product to market, because a lot of the bigger corporations, the craft growers, we're their competition. They're not there to support craft growers and help craft growers get to market. The market is flooded right now with product that can't sell. And so, I can't wait until we're up and running and we're creating a pathway for people, because I do think that it should be legal, and I do think that people should have a simple, easy way to get their product to market and have a successful business.
100% agreed. I mean, it's kind of a travesty. What's the point of legalization in a market where you have in the underground and medical markets prior to legalization, an estimated 50,000 different cannabis producers across Canada? What's the point of legalizing it when those people are people who fought for decades to get it legalized? If you're then going to not even make it viable for them to enter the market, like what's the point at that point? Either the entire goal was to make this corporate and keep people out, which is a possibility. Corporate entities are the only ones who like really understand how to lobby and how to like work the federal policy creation. And I can guarantee you that 99.99% of the growers who were in the medical and illicit markets, they don't understand how to lobby and how to like work the the federal systems out there. So there's and lobbying is registered online in the database, and you can see the auroras, the Tilrays, the canopy growth. You can see how many things they have lobbied for. So we know with certainty that has taken place. And whether or not that's entirely as a result of their work, or there was other further intentionality around creating this kind of separation, I don't really know. I can't speak to that. I'm not like part of the process. But the end result is that we have a system today that does not care at all about small businesses, which is really fucked up when we have an industry that's almost entirely comprised of small businesses who are community focused and care about people. What has been shown over the past few years is that those big enterprises, they don't care about anybody. They were totally happy to dupe tens of thousands of investors, take their money, get rich off of it, and then let their stocks tank and let all these common investors just lose boatloads of money. They were super fine to do that because that was their goal. Their goal was to make a lot of money. They didn't care how. They didn't create anything of actual value. And now cannabis industry in the legal world has a bad rep because of all those stock market plays where people just took advantage of others. So what is it that you want to support? Companies that are into that kind of an approach of just like screwing over investors, or people who are community focused who really just want to make a difference and help people live easier lives and better lives?
Yeah, I know I think that's, it's my position. The position that I have is kind of like a leader in this space in my region is kind of tricky, because the hardest part of it is that a lot of my peers criticize me for being pro legalization because of those things, because people don't trust the government right now, because the way that it was rolled out, it appears like there's some corruption in there, because it isn't fair for people. So I can understand that. And yet, I touched upon why I think that it is like the good parts of legalization. But I'm trying best to do my best. And that is also partly why, when I was like, okay, well, I'm going to help people, get legal. And at the same time, we really need a policy group. We need to focus on changing policy. And I think for me, instead of being like, no, I'm just completely anti-government and, and I don't trust them, I'm like, no, we need to advocate for a fair change and fair transitions. We need to look at these policies and we need to advocate for changes. And I think that, it's been a lot of work, as you know.
And it will continue to be a lot of work. But to all the naysayers, the people who maybe like have lost respect for you because you've chosen to go down this legal path, I think they're mistaken, because the tide's turned. Like, cannabis is legal now. It's not going to be unlegalized. Like, it's going to remain this way, and it's going to continue to get harder and harder to participate in the cannabis industry without being licensed as more time goes on. And so on the one hand, you could reasonably say the government has shown they don't really care about us, so why would we work with them? It's not an unreasonable stand to take, but I don't think it's the logical one, because it's not going to go away. And so to create an actual legitimate viable future for everybody in this craft industry, I think we have to enter the industry and fight for what we think is right and make the change from within, because that's the only long-term solution. Like, cannabis around the world is starting to be decriminalized, legalized for medical purposes, legalized for recreational. Like, I think there's over 40 states now in the US that have legalized cannabis in some form or another. That's like, who would have ever thought that 10 years ago? That would have been like a, oh yeah, right kind of attitude. Was what anybody would have said if you told them more than 40 states in the US are going to have legalized cannabis by the end of this decade. And it's so the tide's turning, and we're not going back. So to anybody who is, rah government, I agree. I think it's a reasonable take, but I don't think it's the right one. I think the only way that there's going to be a viable future is to really put our feet down and be like, no, this is not okay. This is what needs to change in XYZ way.
And to be honest, through this, the few years that I've been working with this, I have met a lot of government, and I have had also a lot of really good experiences with government, particularly the Cannabis Secretariat, and different ministers, and I've had really good experiences with Health Canada too. When in the beginning, when Stacey and I were helping the farmers that we were working with get legal, and they're like, okay, well, we want to grow food. And so we go to Health Canada. They said, okay, well, almost every one of our growers wants to grow food in their gardens. And Health Canada is like, oh, food. Well, no one's ever asked us this yet. I'm like, well, obviously, because you haven't had that many, like people like us try to, it's mainly corporate people. So, but they went back, and they talked and they discussed, and they came back and said, okay, you can grow food where you just can't sell it to the public. So, and there, the government has this really tricky situation. Legalization, unlike, I'm sure there's a lot of opposition. And so and this is also why I was like, no, I'm going to get into legal cannabis, and I'm going to create a policy group, and we're all going to work together to create change, because the government of Canada creates regulations and policy with, like any other business, you need to think about risk mitigation and public concerns and what do we do. And so we create this extremely strict and restrictive, regulations, but there's room to change and there's room to grow. And the most important thing about cannabis and the legalization of cannabis is that we are in an insane place right now in the world around climate change. And cannabis is not just a recreational drug. It is food, it is fiber, it is medicine. The things that we can do, like I think about right now in the Kootenay region, like we're really focused on, we have a huge forest. We do a lot of logging. And it's been really kind of destructive around watersheds as well. And we've had fires, I don't know, for maybe 5 years in a row now. Now people are, consider, leaving for a month because it's just too smoky and people can't actually, exist comfortably in the Kootenays right now in the summers. And to me, when I look around, I think to myself, well, this has a lot to do with the way that forest is managed, which is a lot to do, again, with this kind of industrial way that the government works, which is, let's look at what species we're going to make the most profit off of, and we're going to go in and we're going to decimate all biodiversity, and we're going to just plant these certain species of trees. And now all of a sudden, just like cannabis, if you want to do monoculture and you want to grow one specific thing and you don't create a biodiversity, now you are susceptible to pests and diseases. It's to me, we need to really do a lot of change on a huge systemic level. And cannabis is a tool, a major tool moving forward into this future. And it has come at a time where it needs to be legal all around the world. We need to stop this, this discriminatory view on people who have taken care of this plant and brought it through the last 100 years. So we still have this plant alive. Like, there is so much that we can do with this. The innovation, the people in the craft culture who love and care for this plant, there is so much innovation that can happen right now. And we can be looking at creating hempcrete. We can be taking the stalks of all the cannabis in the Kootenays. We can put it into hempcrete and we can build with it. There is so much that we can do. And that is why it needs to be legal on a global level, so we can rethink the way we work with our resources. And yeah.
So do you just make sure I want to kind of paraphrase what I think you're saying there, Shannon. So you're seeing like the quote unquote wastes that's left behind from cannabis, all the stalks. You're seeing that as a thing that can be processed to then have access to raw fibers that can be used to make paper, clothing, actual building material, what have you, as a way to mitigate the effects of industrial forestry. Is that am I understanding that correctly?
That is part of it. I just think that we need to be look at also biodiversity, and that is, again, what antidote. And this antidote's a crazy word, and it's a very, like, we really struggle with, like, do we want to be called antidote? It just kind of came to us like, like the plant was like antidote. And we're like, antidote. We're like, no, that's like anti, and like, what are we trying to say? But it's like, oh, but there's so much in this word that we all just really are aligned with, which has to do with this like love and passion and care for this plant and all the myriad, of ways that we can work with it and use it. And again, mostly all of the growers involved with Antidote are either indoor, growing with living soil, or outdoors, doing regenerative agriculture. And my point to this is that we really want to demonstrate organization that focuses on, being a model for change and creating biodiversity in the cannabis cultivation. And modeling that to our government, showing them, and that's what we've been doing. We've been bringing the government to all of our cultivators' farms and trying to show them, like, there's so much that we can do to create change, and we really need to do it really quickly.
Awesome. To our audience, we're going to shift to questions and answers pretty quickly here. So if you have any questions, go ask them in the questions tab, upvote the ones that you like. After we kind of wrap up this discussions in the next few minutes, we'll go through and ask in order of upvotes. So go ahead and do that if you haven't asked your questions or upvoted the ones you like already. Shannon, Are there any like final thoughts or final discussion topic you want to get into before we shift to that Q&A?
I don't know. I'm just ranting now.
I love hearing you rant. It's great because you rant in different directions than the average rant. Like it's not the average person that would tie in forestry and biodiversity and monocrops and into like kind of and environmentalism at large into how cannabis can be really transformative to our planet. It's like, and I think it's a really good point. And talking to monoculture, like the regulations like push people towards monocultures. It's like when you have like all these costs associated with every individual brand name that you want to publicize out there, which if you're talking about flower, is typically going to be the cultivar name, then does it make sense to have 3 different crops if you're going to have to pay on the order of $3,000-$4,000 per crop just to get it listed in BC, and that's higher in other provinces? And if you're doing multiple provinces, you have to deal with the process of getting the SKUs for every single one. And it's like, no, your average small scale producer with the current environment's just gonna be like, fuck it, I'm just doing one cultivar, because then it can all be one lot, and it's gonna be it's gonna be that much easier. Earl corrects me. BC doesn't charge a listing fee. Alberta does, but you still have to go through the process for each one. Like BC might choose, we're not going to give you 3 SKUs, even though you have 3 things, because there's too many other craft growers. We're only going to give you 1, and then you're kind of screwed for having created 3 different cultivars. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot that can be unpacked in that rant there. How about you give us one more rant, Shannon?
Well, I think that there is just one more thing that I think that really needs to change, which is a lot to do with the packaging and the way that that to me is a disaster, and the environmental impact of that. And the marketing restrictions. And again, let's just go back to education. Let's look at what the actual risk is. The way, like, you can walk into a liquor store and you can purchase as much liquor as you want. You can fill your bags with, bottles and bottles of hard alcohol and bring it home. And, what's the risk of cannabis? Like the actual risk of cannabis? We need to, again, I understand where the government came from in the beginning, but we need to change this.
But Shannon, cannabis can give you the munchies, and then you might overeat. That's such a huge risk, Shannon. It's so much worse than the possibility of drunk driving. It might make you more creative. So risky. Yeah, and to the packaging point, like I think the requirement to have everything be prepackaged is so terrible, especially with just like the copious amount of plastic waste that's generated now. Like, I love being able to go into a brewery, take a growler, fill up my, gallon or whatever it is of beer, and have that be my transaction. And every time I get beer, I'm using the same exact glass jar. There's no waste created there. And cannabis used to be that way in the compassion clubs. They'd have the big curing jar, really keeps the quality of the cannabis quite well in that context. And then you just say, I want 5 grams, I want 10 grams, I want whatever it is. And you just get whatever that mass is weighed for you in real time. And that's like a very common model. Like any deli, any supermarket in their deli section, like just so many different types of stores have that as their model. It's a per unit weight. And I really hope that the regulations can shift to a point where that's permissible, because a nice phone tone there, because there is so much waste that overnight started being generated once the regulations kicked in. And it's sad considering how much the government talks about we really want to work on environmental impact. Well, prove it with your regulations. Don't force people to create waste unnecessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, cannabis isn't just an industry; it's a culture, and we really need to embrace the culture as a country. And we need to look at what are the positive things about this culture and what are the values and the ethics behind this counterculture. And that has a lot to do with care for the environment, care for people, the Compassion Club, like that is the culture of cannabis here in British Columbia. And if we want to have a successful transition, and it's a lot of revenue of taxes to put back into our country and have the purpose to eliminate illicit crime, well, then let's look at how we can transition this culture and bring people, as regular citizens of Canada. There's a lot of again, back to there's a lot of change that needs to happen in this country. And that has a lot to do with, inclusion of everyone and all people, and how do we create safe and healthy environments for everybody and get rid of this kind of stigmatization and look at, what can we learn from all these innovative, passionate people about this plant. And we could lead the country and lead the world with all this kind of knowledge that's just, being, in the shadows, because people don't feel like it's a smart move to transition into the legal world, because it is not profitable and you need to continuously be treated like a criminal. Mm-hmm. And it's just so sad, and I look at some of the Facebook groups that we're on, where all these people are like, yeah, we're all excited and we're, into, and then it's like, oh, we're having a hard time selling. Oh, we're having a hard time doing this. And it's just like, it's hard not to get discouraged. But I am just a really I'm always looking for solutions, and I'm always just trying to think about that big, big picture, that this plant needs to come out into the world. We need to rethink our relationship with it, and we need to rethink the way that we, I don't know, I think, again, back to just, like I was saying before, it's like, I think all drugs should be legalized and regulated. I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do to be accountable to a lot of the, suffering that has gone on in this country, which, I just was in Vancouver and I was walking the downtown east side, and, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not a judgmental person. I'm not like, you're bad because you're, a drug addict. I think to myself, what has happened in your life? Where did you come from? What kind of suffering? What kind of support? I think that we just really need to re-look and evaluate our country right now on all levels.
I used to actually live in downtown east side. I started a live work artist collective there that I ran and lived in for 6 or 7 years, and talked to many people on the street that were suffering there, and almost all of them had just such a sad story that led to where they were. I remember one guy who was kidnapped from his parents as a child, put into the residency school system, went through some foster care systems, and he's just he's blocked his memory of what happened. The only thing he remembers is the sense that I got is that his younger sister was being raped by their foster parent. He burned down their house, took her, and ran away. And that's the only memory he has of pre kind of escaping as a teenager. And that was the start of his adult life as a 15-year-old boy taking care of a younger sister. And why is it surprising that that person eventually turned to substance use to just cope with the trauma, the deep psychological traumas that they had, and ended up being homeless in the poorest zip code in Canada. It's like, and that's not an uncommon story, and it's sad that so many people jump to you're bad, you made bad choices, this is your fault, instead of recognizing that maybe there's something else that happened that is not their fault, that was entirely out of their control, that led to the situation that they're in.
There's a lot of healing that needs to be done right
totally.
now, like a lot. And I think that for me, as someone that's been, part of this culture for decades, and someone that really studies plant medicine, that we need to relook and reevaluate our relationship with plant medicine and drugs in general. There's a lot of great work that's happening now with psychedelic therapy and studies for people to help go to those awful traumatic places and heal.
Yeah.
And where there's no reason why people should be getting, bad supplies of drugs, and, and that we should have all these fentanyl overdoses, and that all these people around me, that I've seen pass away because of this. It's all wrong. We need to change the entire system. We need to be more compassionate and caring for every single person around us. That is, to me, the real thing that we need to focus on all around the world right now. And that there's bigger things happening that I won't get into, but I'm a very spiritual person. And my relationship and why I'm here is because I really feel connected specifically to the cannabis plant. I have a very deep relationship with it, and I feel like I'm doing my best to enter in, to this world and trying to hold these values and ethics, and with the hope that other people around me will be inspired, and we will all work together as a community, because we really need each other right now to get through this really challenging time, in order to share the gifts that we have around our passion and love for this plant.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end on there, Shannon. Here's to healing the world in the many ways it needs to be healed. And I'm excited to know you, and that in this industry that we're part of, that your journey is taking you on this mission to help cannabis become a destigmatized thing, a decriminalized thing, and something that's legitimately viable to play its part in helping heal people and helping heal aspects of our environment, aspects of our culture, and to create a truly thriving small-scale industry here in the Kootenays and BC and Canada at large. And I think it's possible. We wouldn't be doing this podcast. You wouldn't have started CertiCraft if we didn't think it was possible. Our mission as a business is the same as yours, is to help these small-scale producers transition into and thrive in this world. And yeah, I'm excited to know you, and thankful that you joined us here today to share all of your thoughts. All right, let's shift over to the questions. So Braden Job asks, could you explain how the Antidote model works, with cultivators owning a share of the processing company?
Sure. So Antidote started with the founding members are craft growers, and if you're interested, there is a minimum investment of $10,000, and you can invest into Antidote and become a shareholder of it, and have a voting say and help guide the company.
Cool. All right. Stacy Johnston, who is working on Antidote, asks, how will Antidote succeed where other processors haven't, i.e. shelter?
Well, I don't know shelter stories. I can't talk about other people, but how we're going to succeed. I think it's our story. I think that a lot of consumers are really wanting a story and something that they align with, that they feel good about, and that your educated consumer has traditionally been used to a certain product and a certain amount of quality. And Antidote is going to have the best quality cannabis out there in the world, pretty much, because we have
Pretty
the
solid
best
claim there, Shannon.
We do. I get so excited all the time, and like the Unicorn Cup is a great way to highlight a lot of the amazing craft growers in the Kootenays. Like, these are people that have refined this process and have been working for decades and decades. The genetic library that is associated with with the multiple amount of people, it's in the thousands and thousands of different genetics. Genetics to create, again, back to biodiversity, you need to have a diverse amount of genetics to breed and to create healthy plants. We're going to be able to, to have a lot of variety, which is, you don't really see a lot right now in the retail shops. And I think it's.
Oh, I just want to say shout out to Sarah Mack. I see you here. You're one of the best breeders I've met. Speaking of breeders in the Kootenays. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. So you paused for a moment, and then I waited just a slight minute too long to give that shout out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we also have one of the best extract artists in the world, and the amount of support that we have is just insane. The amount of people who, that are already successful in the cannabis world can see that we have something of great value. And also just that it's grower owned. So I think a big difference right now with a lot of standard processors is that a lot of the investment, is coming from people that have, they don't really understand the culture. And often what happens is that business decisions are being made, and the kind of more corporate investors are like, no, this is the right decision to make, and it doesn't align with the values and the ethics. I think that to be successful in the long term, you need to stand behind what you are speaking on, and that longevity of integrity and values, and creating a high quality products made from some of the best growers in the world is what's going to make Antidote successful. I think the other part of it's just going to be the innovation that's going to come out of it. Like, I can't even begin, it was so challenging to create that business plan. We have these 3 stages in our business plan because, everyone gets so excited about all the things that we want to accomplish, but we have to take things step by step. And a lot of that has to do with not getting in over our head and just executing little tiny steps perfectly along the way, and having a really strong financial team to help all the growers navigate that big business world.
Cool. Yeah, and I'd say, like, from my perspective, that's the biggest piece, that you guys aren't big business. You're not entering this for, like, corporate or stock market values. That's not your interest at all. You're really doing this because it's a need. You're doing it because people are struggling, and you want to provide a solution that actually works for the needs of farmers. And I think from the farmer, ignoring consumers for a second, from the farmer perspective, that's why I think you're going to work, because people get that. They see what your history, they see what you've done, they see what you care about, they see what your values are, and they're willing to align with you. They want to work with you. They're like, no, you actually understand our challenges, and you're trying to make it easier. And that's what we need. We need something that's going to make it easier, not somebody who's going to, like, see how they can take advantage of us in every kind of way possible. Oh, the market's really low right now, so you know what? We're going to offer you half of what we agreed in terms of price, because we can. and we just feel like it, we're going to take advantage of it. You're not going to do that, right? And that's a pretty huge difference from a lot of the companies that are out there in terms of how they tend to operate. Not all of them. I don't want to kind of paint the picture that every processor out there is has dubious ethics, but a lot do.
One of the best pieces of advice I had from somebody when Antidote was being created was really focus on those values, mission, and vision statement, because Antidote is going to outlive and outgrow all of the original founders. And so we've spent a lot of time on that. And I think that I hope that we become a model. We're not going to be a publicly traded company. We're going to make a successful model for this region. And back to the values of our company, we're going to do our best to help other people create their own models in their own regions, so growers can have, that control over their product and have a successful business.
All right. Next question is from Marty with 2 points. He asks, will Antidote be focusing primarily on offering products to the BC market, or are you also interested in gaining access to other provinces like Alberta and Ontario?
I guess we're going to see what happens with the changes in the provincial distribution system. To me, local is best. I'm, like I said, from my history, I've always been to localized food systems and localized systems in general. I try my best to support all my local small businesses. So we're going to really focus locally as much as possible, but recognizing that Ontario is also a real beast who really love what we have to offer internationally too. I think that there's a lot of opportunities internationally, and but local, buy local, BC, all of those things are really important. So yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine initially, given the missteps that have been made in policy setting on various levels of government, that a lot of it's going to really be dictated by what's actually realistic, so that we can actually succeed and make enough money that we can actually pay all of our cultivators what they deserve to be paid, and ensure that we're getting by and doing it successfully. I imagine that as time goes on, you can shift from strictly what's necessary in order to stay above board and be able to make ends meet into, okay, now that all the advocacy work we've been doing for the past 4 years is really starting to pay off. There's starting to be changes that are legitimately possible. Direct delivery has come underway. It's taken a year or two to really dial it in, get the BCLDB to actually listen, and so on and so forth. We'll be in a position soon where there's a lot more options and selection, I think, but I kind of imagine that'll be harder in the early days,
in the early stages. But I think as the market matures and develops into agritourism, I just think the Kootenay region just has so much potential for agritourism. Totally. And if you have the right equipment and the processing abilities to create value-added products, I can just imagine CBD spas and massage places to go get a nice massage using CBD products, or having consumption lounges. Really, we could supply our local industry once the market matures.
Sarah, I see you've asked a question in the comments that people like. Go ask it in the questions tab. I'm going to make you do that, even though I can see your question. Jean-Pierre asks, do you think that very big LPs that are losing millions of dollars each year are hurting the cannabis market, and how can we change that?
Yes, they're definitely hurting the cannabis market. And I just think I predicted that in my existential crisis mode and why I decided to, again, just be like, okay, go for this, was because I knew that, the kind of more bigger industrial models were going to be let's, scale this right up and produce all of this weed so we can supply the world with it. And I thought to myself, oh, geez, once you start scaling things up, Now all of a sudden, and then you have the ethics of a big corporate organization who doesn't want to pay their labor costs and put quality work into things. Well, now you're not going to be pruning it properly. Now you're going to have pests and diseases. Now you're going to be all of the way that I could just predict how that was going to go was it was going to create poor quality. And I have been, I constantly am going into retail stores since legalization because I really want to support our local retailers. And I've been trying a lot of different products. And so I think the overflood of poor quality cannabis and is created a lot of price compression. And it's not allowing for craft growers to get the right cost per gram that makes them have a successful business.
Awesome. I see Sarah Mac's question has been answered and immediately shot up above to where I am right now. Sarah asks, are you able to give an idea on minimum batch sizes that Antidote will accept?
I think we're going to try our best to work with every single cultivator, and do just work really hard for them because we are grower owned. So I don't have a specific answer on that because, that would have to come from, the production team but what I suspect is going to happen and what our plan is that we're going to have these different ways we can co-brand and act as a distributor for craft growers that meet that provincial craft size. But we will also have brand houses. And we'll be able, and because we have equipment for creating value added products, we'll have brand houses that we can take smaller batches and put it into a brand house.
And just for me, as somebody who's not too familiar with the world of marketing, what does brand house actually mean?
Well, that, like, for example, say that we have some topicals or some like a gummy line or some gummy bear line or something like that we would be able to take different varieties of cannabis and small batches and put them into a brand. As opposed to, like, for example, a lot of our indoor micros, like Kootenay's Finest or Kootenay Quantum, or, they're going to have the ability, because they have this steady volume of product, they'll be able to co-brand, the local retailers will be expecting their product and they'll just be able to get out and, but for people that just have one batch a year or have, then it's going to have to go into something else to get to the market.
Okay. Marty asks, will your facility utilize cold storage during the packaging process?
Yes, we're going to have freezer storage. Yeah.
Great. You'll be like one of the very few processors that actually ensure that the perishable product doesn't perish.
Oh, yeah. That's another part of why this is so important too, like from just seeing people struggle and get to market and working with different processors is, craft cultivators are very, very specific around their environmental controls and how things are cured and dried and packaged. And so that is something that we're really focused on, is the proper environmental controls and keeping that essence of what is craft. There's no, it gives me gray hairs just thinking that, you spend all that time and you're taking care of this most perfect quality product that then leaves on these trucks going, and like sitting in warehouses. And yeah, I like to get rid of that because that has a lot to do with product recall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nigel asks, what other benefits do the members of the processor receive?
What other benefits of the members of the processors receive?
Yeah.
There we have like a membership. So you can either be an unlicensed member or you can be a licensed member of Antidote. If you're an unlicensed member, we have a very minimal monthly fee where we help people get licensed. And just to get them, through those gates and provide them with all the services that we did before. It was with our team at the CBTI. And once you are licensed, then you can become the licensed membership, where now you have kind of a compliance hotline. If you are having any kind of challenges in production, you can call our compliance hotline and receive support on, different things of like how you stay compliant, what products you can use. If there's certain things about, standard operating procedures, or you need some advice or guidance on that. We also are going to have an open source kind of library where people are going to be able to share recipes. There's the Rose Buddies group, for example, where they get on the call every Thursday night and they sit and they talk about their challenges and what they're doing, and what kind of pests are happening. And so there's a lot of benefits. We're also doing an integrated quality management system to avoid product recalls, and to give all of our clients the support that they need to remain compliant and have the resources and information that is so difficult to find otherwise.
That's way more comprehensive than I realized Antidote was planning to be. And I think that makes you the single most comprehensive processor service available in Canada, because I don't think anybody goes to this kind of level to support the growers that they work with. I see we have one last question. This will be our final question of the day from Sarah Mack again. And she asks, will Antidote be a farm gate business too? And before you answer, Shannon, I'm just going to say that on some level, this really depends on the farm gates regulations, because they're still kind of, they were at first saying, yeah, we'll let processors too, and then they switched the tune to like, no, we're only going to focus on actual farms. And I was part of some calls with the Cannabis Secretariat's office as part of my role with the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council. Shannon was on those calls too, where we kind of brought up like examples like Antidote of like, well, this is a community hub that's helping all these farmers, some of which are in very rural, hard to access places, that don't have the infrastructure or capacity as a 1 or 2 person operation to really operate a farm gate store on top of being a farmer. And so BC was pretty receptive to that. I don't know where that conversation's gone, because I've kind of had a lot on my plate in the past month or two and have stepped back a little bit from those conversations. But it seems like it might happen, but it really depends on what the government decides on a policy level. Because if they decide that's not possible, then it's out of Antidote's hand until that shifts. With that context being shared, I'll turn it over to you, Shannon, to add whatever you feel is relevant.
Yeah, I think the BC government's intention was not to allow standalone processors to have farm gate, and I think that when we approached them with our model, it's an anomaly. And but I think
anomaly in that it's farmer owned. Is that what you mean?
That it's farmer owned, and I think that there's a big difference between the Kootenay region and the Lower Mainland, which I am really thankful that the Secretariat and the provincial government does work with us and try to understand our challenges, because it's exactly that. It's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of our farmers to have farm gate on their farm, because, well, for instance, you harvest your cannabis in September or October, you got to dry it, cure it, package it, get it processed. Now we're into November, December, January, February, March, and in those months in the Kootenays, there's a lot of road closures, there's a lot of avalanches, there's a lot of, tourism is mainly just for the ski community, and it's very in specific locations. And farm gate model is a great idea, doesn't make a lot of financial sense for a lot of the people associated with Antidote. So we did have a meeting with the provincial government, with all of the Antidote associated growers, so they could all just express this to the government. And we're hoping to have a farm gate, but only for our specific clients' products and not from outside products. And then what we would love to see is a farm gate at Antidote, which then we could promote all of the farms and have like, because marketing's so hard right now, we can, have a photo of our farmers, be like, this is the hours of operations. You can go on a farm tour, hop on these e-bikes, here's your map, go up to Spokane Valley, go and say hi to people and, those kinds of things. We really would like to see us promoting because of those marketing restrictions.
Awesome, Shannon. I've talked to you a lot about Antidote over the past like year or more, like even before it was called Antidote, like when it was just an idea in your head and you're like, Sami, I think this is what we need. And this has matured so much. This is so much more than kind of what the initial vision that you were sharing was, or it's like, I love how much it's incubated and grown and matured, and it sounds awesome. And I sincerely hope that you guys get your license soon, and that we're able to support you with the solventless extraction piece. That module is well underway. It should be completed next month, like I told you when we chatted on the phone earlier this week. And yeah, I'm excited to see the difference you guys make here. I'm excited. I've learned a lot about Antidote that I didn't really realize was part of the plan in this conversation here.
Yeah, thanks, Sami. I know I saw some people being like, are you on social media? I personally am not on social media very often. And that is going to be our next stage, is kind of getting onto social media and advertising. We do have a website, but I made it myself in my spare time. And like, Sami, I am not a computer person. So if you want to find us, we're out there. It's antidoteprocessing.com. But it will be changed when we, when we get our graphic designers and the professional people on there. But it is a way to get a hold of us. We got our slogan out there. We got what you weed.
we got what you weed. Is that what you said?
We got what you weed. So yeah, people can reach out. We can help them with licensing for just a minimum monthly cost, get you going, and help you get to market.
You could make it weed got what you weed. A bit harder to roll off the tongue, but more commitment. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here today for this episode. This has been Shannon from Antidote with an absolutely wonderful conversation here. Thanks, Shannon, again for being here. If you guys are licensed and want to use a service to help you make the compliance side way easier, we'd love to talk to you. You can, if you go to CertiCraft.com, you can find a little request a demo button there and connect with us that way. Next up on episode 22, we got Serena Donovan. She is the founder of my personal favorite brand in cannabis. And when I say brand, I mean like literally just the name of her company. It's called Because You Can, with 2 N's. I just love it. It's such a great name. She's one of the first micros that was licensed in Canada. I think she was number 2 in Alberta, if I'm not mistaken. She's an incredible woman, and really curious to hear her thoughts on the state of craft. Thank you all for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And see you all later. Thanks, Shannon, again.
Thanks, Sami. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.